Howdy YouTube, and welcome to this episode of the Gunman. So this video here, I'll be taking you guys through the primer, prep, masking and paint work on this red Range Rover Evoque. The paint code is 1AF and the name of the color is Firenza Red, and this is actually exactly the same color that is on the XE Jaguars. I actually did a fairly popular video on YouTube recently, and that was on an XE Jaguar where I painted a fender and a door. So you're probably familiar with this color anyway. They don't use exactly the same variant on the Range Rovers as they do the Jaguars, because I remember when I mixed up the color for the Jaguar, it had a special tinter in it, and it was one that we didn't actually so we had to order that in. And for this color here, it actually had a different set of tinters in it, and the color actually wasn't quite as good. So for the Jaguar, I just mixed it up, sprayed it out, checked the color, and it was perfect. But for this one, it actually needed a little bit of matching, so I had to put a couple of extra tinters in it to make it look right. I haven't actually included any of the color matching stage in this video, but maybe something I can do in some more future videos. I do have a few other videos on color matching if you guys would like to check through my channel. But anyway, straight into the primer work. So it's just a couple of small little repairs there. I can't really tell you exactly what happened in the damage, to be honest. I just paint shit basically. So as you can see here, I've got some UV primer out and I'm putting that through my primer gun. Now this video here is probably about, the footage itself is probably about 2 or 3 months old now, but I'm just getting around to editing the video up for you guys. So back then I used to use my 2mm primer gun. As you can see here, this is my Pro Lite. I've done a specific review on this gun as well, but these days with this UV primer, I've actually been using my mini gun. So nowadays, if I was to do this, I would be grabbing my ANI R150 1.2, and I found that actually sprays the UV primer a lot nicer. It gets minimal material on, and yeah, less chance of overloading it, and it's a bit more precise as well. So yeah, if you do use UV primer, I recommend using a mini gun with it, not a mini gun with too small of a nozzle on it. So I've got the 1.2. I would imagine 1.0 would be fine, but anything smaller than 1.0 mil, and you're probably not going to be getting enough material out. And yeah, so with that UV primer, there's no reducer required, and again, I do have a specific review on that UV primer too, so if you'd like to check that out, you can go and look through my channel. But yeah, basically just put 2 coats on. You don't want to overdo it, and then you whack it out in the sun. Yeah, specific UV primers, they actually need a specific light to cure it, but the one that we're using, the Metalux one, that's actually quite fine just curing it in the natural sunlight. So I'm doing a bit of seam sealer work here, and wouldn't you know, the tube of seam sealer decided to die as I just started, so I had to wipe it out. That's a good way to wipe it out. Just get an old piece of sandpaper and rip it out, and then maybe wipe the rest of it off with a rag. I've then gone and stocked up refilled the seam sealer canister, and this seam sealer gun I'm using here is air powered, so it's going to give you a very even flow of material coming out, not like the old caulking guns where you've got to pull the trigger on it, and yeah, sometimes they can get a little bit uneven throughout that bead that you do. I actually learned how to seam seal with a standard old caulking gun and without those butterfly tips that you can see there. So half of that tip will actually rest along the side of the door, and it's going to enable you to get a nice even bead. But as soon as I started using these guns, it was just like, wow, seam sealer is so easy, because I did learn how to do it the old-fashioned way and the hard way. But yeah, seam sealer, it's pretty important stage. I reckon, you know, it's a good idea to get it nice and neat. I don't like messy seam sealer. Yes, it's not going to be the first thing that people look at, but to me it's a difference in between being able to recognize a job being done, and at the end of the day, our job is to make this car look like it's never been in an accident. And when you're getting nice neat beads of seam sealer like that, well then there's going to be less chance of people being able to discover our repairs. So I then put that seam sealer out in the sun just to dry it off before I put it on the panel stand. You're actually right to spray straight over that seam sealer when it's wet. You're usually pretty right to do that with most seam sealers I've used anyway, but I actually just put it out in the sun to dry it so that we don't put our fingers in it when we put it onto the panel stand. So cleaning the panel down obviously before I did the prep work. Now as it turned out, I had to jump onto another job, and I sort of lost my train of thought on this job, and then I just ended up prepping the job up off camera, so I didn't include all of the prep work in this job, but we've got a little bit of troubleshooting in the booth, so that'll sort of, you know, keep you guys interested in this video, hopefully. So yeah, obviously we've got it in the booth. Next up, I've got the door onto that stand. I'm wiping it down with some wax and grease remover and a clean cloth. So these are the DuPont Sontara, or just Sontara now. They used to be called DuPont Sontara, but they're just the Sontara wipes, just the hygienic and sterile cloths, I guess you'd call them, and they're meant to be lint free, but sometimes you do get a couple of little bits of lint left behind on those cloths, so it's a good idea to always tack cloth after. And also, this wax and grease remover I was using back then is pretty crap, and since I've actually got rid of it, and this is one of the main jobs, the reasons why I had to get rid of it, because as you see, I did wipe it down quite thoroughly with the wax and grease remover, and now when I go to put this wet on wet primer down, it ends up waxing up or silicon up on me. So I'm using my DeVilbiss GTI Pro Lite, the gold one, and I've got the T110 air cap on it. I've been using the T110 air cap for my wet on wet primers and my 2K direct gloss solid colors, and I've been very impressed with it. It gets minimal material on, very precise, and it gets a nice fine atomization, so you're not overloading that wet on wet primer, which is something that you really don't want to do. You don't want to put too much of that wet on wet primer on it. It literally is just one sort of medium wet coat, so it's still closed, so that you're getting coverage over the black panel, so that you're not trying to, you know, get full coverage out of your red over the top. So this is also acting as a bit of a ground coat, and you'll also see later on what I'm going to do is put a coat of this wet on wet primer over the surrounding panels on the blend panels, so the back of the front door and the front of the quarter panel, just to make sure that the color's going to match. What the fuck? So you can see my reaction to getting that silicone through that rear door. I wasn't exactly very happy. I was a little bit surprised too, but not to worry, there's always ways of fixing stuff like that, and at the end of the day, it's the end result that we're looking for. Sometimes, yeah, these things happen, and it's just part of spray painting, I guess. So yeah, obviously once I got that wet on wet down, I need to wait for that to dry before I can actually do anything to it anyway, so I'm going to continue on with the masking stage. And that's a good thing to do. Just yeah, leave the car covered up, do your wet on wet primer on your panels, and then do your masking while that's drying. I quite enjoy the masking stage. It's a bit of fun for me. It's just relaxing, I guess. It's not hard work. It's just yeah, taping the panel off, really. It's pretty straightforward to me, and there's not much. I can't really talk about masking so much. It's one of those things that really you've just got to watch what I'm doing, I guess, if you're not really to crash hot on your masking, which I know a lot of people aren't, like panel beaters and people that are sort of new into the trade, like apprentices and DIY guys. They can struggle with masking, and I've seen some panel beaters just really just don't get it, you know, like they can panel beat like really amazing work and that, and then like one of these panel beaters, he's doing his own car and he wanted to mask it up for primer, and I said, oh, you go and start masking it up and I'll get the bumper bars or whatever ready. And I came in like 45 minutes later, he just had bits of tape everywhere and he just didn't get it. I'm like, man, we're going to have to pull all that off, and I had it masked up in like 10 minutes or something like that. So it's just something that comes with time, I guess. You just got to look at it as like, I want paint there and I don't want paint there. So just make sure that, just wrap it up like a Christmas present, I guess. And yeah, Merry Christmas to everyone. I know it's a bit of a late Christmas wish for all you guys, but Merry Christmas and happy 2017. But I did have a little bit of a break over the Christmas period, and I actually didn't make any videos for probably about 3 or 4 weeks. But it was good for me. I guess I just got a little bit bored and tired of making videos, so having a bit of break sometimes is a good thing, and it makes you, when you do come back to it, you just start to enjoy it that little bit more. I made a couple of vlog style videos on my other channel called Gunman's World. I'll put a link to that at the end of the video. And I've also got that raw channel where I just upload basically just raw footage of me spray painting and masking and all that kind of stuff. So as far as masking goes, you're probably just going to be learning more from just literally watching me do it without me talking. You can sit down for 10 or 20 minutes on some of those videos and just see exactly everything I do to get a couple of panels masked up. So be sure to check out the Gunman Raw if you haven't already. That channel's actually starting to gain a bit of momentum and get some more views, and it's just easier for me to upload obviously to that channel. So yeah, I'm probably going to be uploading a little bit more to that channel in the future. So yeah, as I say, just jump over there, give it a sub if you haven't already, and let us know your thoughts on it. I know that there was this one guy and he said, oh man, you know, I've been watching these videos and I swear this guy used to do heaps more talking, and he'd accidentally subscribed to the Raw channel, not realizing that it was my second channel, so he's getting all these painting videos where I'm not talking. Then he found my main channel again, and yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. So yeah, there is 2 Gunman channels, just be aware. So I've got that masking just about sorted out, and you can see there's one big hair in there, and there's also a few decent sized silicone holes opening up. So just pulling that hair out, and then I'll just grab a bit of 400 grit, one of those softback sanding sponges, give those silicone spots a bit of a sand down to remove the worst of it. Also where that hair, the impression from where that hair was, give that a bit of a sand down, and yeah, we'll put a bit more wet on wet primer over it while we're doing wet on wet primer on the surrounding areas where that door does sit, because especially reds in solvent base, they don't cover that well. If this was water based, waterborne, well, the Chromax Pro or Stando Blue, any of those style waterborne paints, you'll get really good coverage, and it's just going to be like 1.5 coats and you're done on just about every color. But for solvent, on the other hand, most of the systems I've ever used anyway, it's not unheard of to have to put like 4, 5, even 6 coats on some of the reds. Even yellows, they're another bad one. Some of the silvers in Standox don't cover that well. I did most of my apprenticeship, or all my apprenticeship, sorry, and most of my time using Glazeret, and coming from Glazeret to Standox, I did notice that the coverage on the silvers weren't quite as good. With Glazeret, you could get like 2.5 coats and you're just about covered on most colors. Whereas Standox, it's still a top quality paint, but when you go and open up a new tin of silver, you can see that over half of that tin is actually just sort of clear binder. So that's why I think a lot of the silvers don't cover as well as Glazeret, because yeah, that binder's obviously just diluting the color a little bit more, so you're going to get worse coverage. I think maybe they might do it just to sort of help the color lay down a little bit better or something like that. I can't really confirm that, but it's a possibility, who knows. But either way, as you can see, I've done my best to remove the worst of the silicone there with the 400 grit pad, and then I'm going to put a little bit more wet on wet primer over there. You can see I started off by putting a sort of a dust coat. Now I'm going to go over the entire door, because if I went over just sort of part of that panel, it might end up going a bit funny and having a bit of a reaction, because it's going to be drying at different rates, I guess. So I just decided to go over the entire panel. And it turns out that I did still miss one part, so I still had to put this on, wait for another sort of 10-20 minutes for it to flash off, give it another scuff, and then I was just about right to put my base coat on. So this is what I was telling you guys about before. I'm going to be putting a bit of the wet on wet primer on the surrounding panels where the door's going to be sitting on, just so that we don't have poor coverage or better coverage on the blend panels than we do on the door, and then we get that door back on and find out that it's actually a shade or 2 out. So you can see that I've decided to just grab a new tack cloth. That other one was getting a little bit old, so get a new one, and yeah, wipe the panels down, get them nice and clean. Obviously blowing the air over the panel at the same time to try and remove any bits of debris or dust or anything that may be left over. So as you can see now, just very careful when I'm putting this on. I don't want to overdo it. I don't want to sort of cover those blends in this wet on wet primer, but if that was to happen, you can get a bit of thinners or reducer or something like that, and then just spray it over the wipe it over to remove any of that overspray. I've had that happen before and it works fine. So gave that probably about 10 minutes. In this heat, you don't need to be giving that wet on wet primer too much. Like, it's probably around 30 to 35 degrees ambient temperature on this day. Obviously drying times are going to vary depending on the material you're using, the amount you put on, and the temperature of the day. So there's no real one sort of definite answer to how long it's going to take between coats. But yeah, you know, if you're using a fast reducer or a fast hardener and it's a cold day, you know, it's going to vary the drying times. But yeah, I just gave that about 10 minutes, and as you can see, it's sort of egg-shelled. You can usually tell just by looking at it if it's egg-shelled, and if you're not 100% sure, just check on your masking, like the masking that's next to it. Just put your finger in it. If it's still wet, well then maybe give it another few minutes. If it's tacked off, if it's dry, well then you're right to go on. So you can see that it's covering fairly well for a red, and especially that grey is working as a good ground coat. But you can still see that it's semi-transparent even after that first coat, but a couple more coats, that will definitely sort it out. You'll probably notice that I put a little bit of that wet on wet primer down over that other primer patch just to make it easier to get coverage. That's just because that UV primer is a little bit darker than this wet on wet primer that we're using. So with the Standox system, it's not 100% the same as the Chromax Pro system with the value shades, but they've got their own sort of version of it, and they've got like a little chart there, and I can decide which variant value shade type thing I want to use. So I can mix up a light grey, a mid grey, or a dark grey wet on wet primer depending on the colour that I'm going to be spraying over the top of it. And on things like the inside of the door, I usually put one less coat. So my rule of thumb with applying base coat and getting coverage is get it so it looks covered and then put one more coat on. So your last coat's usually sort of a medium wet coat. Like, you don't need to put a really sort of wet coat like I'm putting on now. This is fairly wet, I'm getting a good amount of coverage, but that last coat, medium wet to sort of help that metallic stand up. That's with solvent. Obviously you're going to be using different methods when you're using waterborne paints, but I do have a few videos on the waterborne paints as well, and that's just mainly the Chromax Pro range because it's all I've really used as far as waterborne goes. But as far as waterborne versus solvent goes, I'm probably happier spraying solvent. It just seems a bit more natural to me. It's faster and it's cheap. The paint itself is cheaper. You can use the cheaper clears as well, so you can run a tighter ship on solvent. By the time you put all the things like the blowers in the booth, and then you're stirring up dust inside your spray booth, and all those things into it, it's going to be a fair bit more expensive running water than solvent these days anyway. And that's only in Australia, I must say, because I do know that like in some places in America the solvent based paints are really expensive, and I think for commercial use they may even be banned for commercial use. So yeah, places like California, I hear that you're not even allowed to use the solvent based paints in sort of a smash shop, but maybe custom and DIY work you might be able to get some or something like that anyway. And even with their spray guns, it sounds like they've got some pretty crazy laws, like you're only allowed to use HVLP spray guns, and to me, you're not going to save that much paint by using HVLP. You might save, say, 10 mils per panel, and that's if you're using a low VOC or high solids clear. If you're using a medium solids clear, I really wouldn't even recommend using a HVLP spray gun. I don't even use them at all for anything, really. To be honest, I just use my TE20 cap for base coat. Well, that was on this job, but now I've actually been using my Segola, which is pretty good. So I've been using the Aqua Air cap for base and the DVR clear for clear coat. But back in just a couple of months ago when I made this video, I was using the TE20 for base and clear coat. So that's one of the Transtech air caps, and they've still got some really good transfer efficiency rates. You know, they're not overly wasteful, and they get probably nicer, flatter finishes than what you will get with ease in a HVLP spray gun. Yes, if you know how to use a HVLP spray gun and you get the pressure up and you hold the gun nice and close, well then yeah, you can still get some really nice finishes with them. I used them for years actually when I was working at a BMW shop, and yeah, obviously if you're working at sort of like luxury prestige cars, you still got to obviously get some really nice finishes, and you can, but it's just easier to get with your standard air caps like T20, T110, TE10. You know, they're all good air caps for the pros and pro lights. So that's just about wrapping up the base coat stage. You can see that on my last coat, as I was mentioning before, I'm just sort of going medium wet, so not full wet, not full dry or anything like that, just to get that metallic to stand up a little bit. And anytime you're doing your spray out cards, you really want to replicate the same air pressures, the same sort of application as what you're doing on the final finish when you're in the booth, when you're spraying. You see sometimes people, they'll do these spray out cards and they're using like you know, 10 psi or 15 psi or something, but then they'll go in the booth and they'll use 1.5 bar or, you know, 29 psi or whatever it be, and then they're wondering why the colours doesn't look the same as their spray out cards. Well, you haven't actually replicated the exact same finish as what you did when you did your spray out card, so that can actually vary the colours. Alright, so base coat's down, I've got the clear coat mixed up. I'm actually just using the Standox Crystal Pro Clear. It's a pretty good clear, and I'm using my DeVille Best GTI Pro Light Nebula and the T20 air cap as I mentioned before. So first coat, I'm just putting on the outside of the panel of this door anyway. No need to put two coats on the inside. They do that kind of thing from factory, so if I can save myself 50 or 100 mils by scrimping out on the inside of the panel, well then I'm going to do so. Gun settings I'm using is 2 bar pressure, 4 turns out with the fluid, and full fan as I always used to do with the Pro Light. And looking back on this footage, I think I might have to dust her off and get her back out again and start using it a little bit more. I have been using that Segola quite a lot often lately, just about every single job actually, to be honest. So yeah, maybe I'll have to dust her back off and get her back out, because it's definitely a beautiful gun and I have probably been neglecting it a little bit. So yeah, just getting that first coat of clear down, then I'll be giving it probably around 5 minutes between coats while I go outside and clean out the base coat gun. That's what I usually do in between coats, so you don't have any downtime. This job obviously did take a little bit longer than I would have anticipated, and that was just because we had those bits of crap landing in that brand new door panel that we had there. The gloss did die down a little bit, and that's because I did end up putting probably too much wet on wet down, more than what I would have usually liked to have, but it's nothing that didn't come up with a buff, and end results are what we're looking for at the end of the day. Sometimes you get this with spray painting, and yeah, a couple of bits more shit than I would have liked, or little bits of crap landing in that rear door than usual, but hey, this is just part of spray painting. I'm going to put some tunes on for the rest of this video, just for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll give you guys a look at the car when it's all finished off if you want to hang around to the end.
Looking down from the heights that we built all by ourselves, and there is view of the unknown, but we cannot lose control when we feel like the world is against us. We're trying to find ourselves without the defining words. We can no longer hold on to what only makes us hurt. We cannot sink into the dark. The vertigo is getting sharp. There's something greater than ourselves that we must reach for.
thanks for hanging around to the end there, Gunners. Hope you guys did enjoy watching this video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up down below. Hang around to the very end of this video. There's links to my other couple of channels. I've got the Gunman Raw. I've also got Gunman's World, where I upload some vlog style videos when I go over to Thailand. I used to upload them to the Gunman Raw, but then I started to get to the point where I'm like, yeah, these people may not really give a shit about this kind of video, so I'll keep raw, just to raw painting videos. And then I've got that other channel, Gunman's World, so if that does interest you, be sure to go over there and check it out. The more subscribers and the more views I get, I guess it's probably gonna push me to continue to make more content on that channel, so be sure to check them out. Now you've seen this video, get out there and paint some shit. Thanks for watching, and this has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.